Hello and welcome to this Manor Lords food guide. We're going to cover the 7 different types of food that are currently in the game, how to get them, and whether they're worth it or not. So let's get started. First up, we have meat, which you can get from these wild animal deposits here. This is a rich deposit, so it has double the amount available. To get meat, you just need to build a hunting camp, which can be found under gathering and then hunting camp. It doesn't cost anything to build, so I highly recommend it. And if you do have a rich deposit like this one, don't be afraid to put down multiple hunting camps, because as long as you set these limits here, you won't run out of meat. It will come back, they will repopulate. It is important to understand this hunting limit though. If you overhunt, the animals will simply disappear and they will not come back. So make sure that you set staggered limits.
Here I have one for 8 and this for 10, so the hunters will stop hunting when they get to these numbers.
I highly recommend meat as the first food income to get in Manor Lords. Not only do you get meat, but you also get hides, which can be made into leather, which is really useful in the early game. So I definitely recommend that. And also keep in mind when building, you don't want to build anything that's too close to this habitat. Otherwise, the animals will migrate. They won't leave your territory, but they will migrate somewhere else, which could be a real inconvenience. So don't build anything near it. Don't cut any trees down over the habitat either. You can put your hunting camps nearby, but just not in this red circle. Otherwise, it will cause you some issues. So just keep that in mind. And meat should be a great food income for you. It's very stable. It's all year round. Just make sure you keep on top of the level that you're at and you should be fine. So meat as well also has a couple of development points that you can use to enhance your meat income. First, you have trapping, which enables hunters to lay traps and get a passive income of meat. I think it's really useful. Every little bit helps really. And you also have advanced skinning, which doubles the amount of meat harvested by hunters. So maybe if you don't have a rich deposit, but you still want to have enough meat, that's really good. You don't have to go all in on these, but it does just enhance that food resource a little bit as well. And don't forget that there are also policies. This is something that is very underdeveloped in the game right now because it's early access, but there is one specifically that really benefits meat, which is hunting grounds. Wild animals on rich deposits breed twice as fast at the cost of 50% reduced yield from crops. So if you're not really farming, you already have a rich deposit of wild animals and you want to make the most of that, definitely sign this policy. It's really worth it and you'll get a really, really strong income of meat. Next up, we have berries. Berries are a really good food income, but they are seasonal. So you have to keep in mind that this isn't going to be consistent throughout the year. You really want to make the most of this as the berries are growing. So in March of each year, berries will start to grow back. You can start assigning families to gather these berries during that period before it maxes out at 64 out of 64 like here. And they will start harvesting and it will continue to grow. So you'll still be getting a lot more berries without it maxing out and you missing out on that additional growth. Keep in mind also that in winter, in December, berries will start shrinking. So you want to make sure that you've harvested enough berries before that shrinking period because it will disappear very quickly until it starts growing again in March. Also, another tip is don't forget to unassign the families that you have on berries out of season. They're not going to be doing anything and they could be better placed elsewhere. So there are a few things we can do to enhance berries. So here we have a berry deposit of up to 256, which is an amazing food resource for this area. To do that, we have gone to the development points and we've gone for forest management. Forest management doubles the capacity of all berry deposits in that region. I think this one is really useful. Do keep in mind that you only get 6 development points. So if you're really focused on farming, perhaps you don't want to go so much on berries. If you have a rich berry deposit, though, I think having it already rich and then doubling that so that you can get up to 256 is really, really useful. And you can have multiple forager huts foraging for these berries. So make sure you maximize that. Get those guys in during the growing stage and unassign them when it's out of season. And you'll have more berries than you know what to do with. You can see for this region, because I have that massive berry deposit, I have 1.6k berries, which is huge. We can either keep these and that provides us with loads of food income, or we can sell them as well. It's just a great additional resource to have, and I definitely recommend the development point as well. And next up, which I'm sure you have seen a lot for Manor Lords, are veggie plots. These are super useful. They are built as a backyard extension for your burgage plots. So if you go here, we have a vegetable garden. It costs 15 regional wealth, which I think is amazing value. It does take a little bit of time for these veggies to come online. They obviously need time to plant and grow. So you won't get them immediately, which is why I do recommend going for meat and berries in the first instance to get that baseline income. And then this food will come online later on. It's really good food variety as well. You can see here that I have quite a lot of veggies. This is great to add to the food variety that you need to keep people happy, especially for burgage plot level 3. So for me, this is almost a mandatory one. Lots of people have these in their back gardens. And I think it's also important to make sure you keep this in mind when you're building your burgage plot. Build nice, long burgage plot gardens like we have here, and you'll be able to grow so many veggies from these. You'll never struggle for food. This is a really, really good one, and I definitely recommend it. Vegetables are a nice, simple one to have. They don't really require a lot of maintenance or micromanagement. Your families will just plant and maintain these themselves. Do keep in mind, though, if they do have other jobs which are really far away, you want to make sure they have enough time to be harvesting them. But generally, I don't really touch them. They kind of do it themselves, and it provides a lot of food and some nice food variety. So, highly recommend this one. And for number 4, we have bread. This is a slightly longer, not difficult, but you need a lot of different components to make bread happen. So to understand bread, I think it's very important to understand the bread supply chain. So first of all, you will need a farmhouse and you will need a field of either rye or wheat. Once that has been harvested, they will take this back to the farmhouse where they will turn it into grain. That grain will then go to a windmill, which turns that grain into flour. And from there, the flour can either go to a communal oven where it will turn that into bread, or it can go to a bakery and they will produce it there. If you do have bakeries, I would do use those instead. And actually, I would not use a communal oven if you have bakeries available because they just produce it at a much better rate. So once you understand the supply chain and you can plan for that, make sure you have things close enough that they can really sync together and there's not too much distance between the farmhouse, the windmill, and the bakery. The other option for getting grain is rye fields, but to do this, you will need to spend a development point and you'll need to go up into rye cultivation. So you'll obviously need to go through apple orchard first and then into rye cultivation. It is generally very good. So the difference between wheat and rye is just generally they have different fertility. Rye is generally a lot better and has more coverage. So here we are looking at Emma, which is wheat fertility. And if we go over to rye, generally it's a lot better. So we're going to get a lot more out of it. And I think it is worth it if you have a big farming region like this and you have lots of fields. You can definitely go up into the rye cultivation and then make the most of that. If you are struggling for food for some reason, there is always the option of the policy for strict fasting. I haven't used this one, to be honest, because I don't think food is generally too much of an issue. But citizens will skip every fifth meal, which slightly reduces overall food consumption and it decreases your approval rating. But I think you should be fine. And do keep in mind that if you sign a policy, you cannot unsign it, just like a development point. If you're willing to take the permanent decrease in approval rating just for that food consumption reduction, then this one's for you. But I don't know anyone really that has taken this one yet. So these are currently the only two policies available, and they're both related to food. So good to keep in mind and have as an option. But I think the only one that you're likely to use is the hunting grounds one. And if you do go up into rye cultivation, I do think it's really worth it going up for the bakery as well. So if we go to development points, you'll probably have heavy plow already if you're doing a lot of farming. And here you can unlock bakeries as a bakery extension, which produces bread from flour with twice the efficiency of the communal oven. I think this is really, really good. Keep in mind that it is an artisan backyard extension, so you will need a burgage plot at level 2 or above, but you do get these communal ovens in the backyard, and they just produce so much bread. I have 3.5k bread here and 54 months of food supply, and this has helped massively to expand this region. So I think this is probably one of the best tips to get the bakery if you really want to expand on a large scale and have lots of food. You can just focus on farming rye. You can get lots of bread very quickly, and then other seasons you can focus on flax or barley. I think that really, really helps. So that's probably one of my top tips, is go for the bakery. Next up, the last food source that doesn't require any development point is eggs. So to get eggs, you just need to build a chicken coop as a backyard extension. This can be done from level 1, 2, or 3 burgage plots, and it costs 25 regional wealth. You just get these chickens in the backyard, and they will just gradually start picking up eggs. I haven't found them to be the best food income source compared to vegetable plots, and they are more expensive. So although they can take up less room, I think it's worth going for a vegetable plot instead. Next up, we have apples. And to get apples, you will need to go up to your development points and you will need to get orchardry. Once you have that, you can go to a burgage plot and go for a backyard extension of apple orchard. It costs 50 regional wealth, which is a bit more expensive than the other food options. But if you want that food variety, then you can go for it. It does take a while to come online. The development point tooltip does say it takes around 3 years before they fully produce apples, and until then they will produce just a fraction of that, so do keep that in mind. They will harvest these every September, so you can expect those to come online then, and just plan accordingly. Do experiment with different layouts for these. I have found that this wider shape does tend to get a better yield. I've gone for some really long ones here, but unfortunately they're on a hill, so they haven't quite filled that whole space, unfortunately. Whereas these ones over here aren't as steep and they have filled the space a bit better. But do experiment with different shapes and sizes to try and find the best yield for you. But I think apples is quite a good one, especially if you're going into rye cultivation anyway. It isn't the highest yield, and obviously it does take some time to come online, but I think it is a good one. And finally, we have honey. This requires the apiary unlock, which if you go into development points and you go for beekeeping, you can then build the apiary and start collecting honey. It's only really worth having one family working this at a time. Again, similar to eggs, I haven't really found this to be the most efficient or very useful food source. It does add a little bit of food variety, but the output is generally not that great. So given that you only have 6 development points, I don't think this is really worthwhile. I would rather put this into enhancing, either doubling the berry deposits or enhancing hunting supply. I think they're much more worthwhile. So personally, not one I recommend, but it is always nice to unlock different buildings and just have a play and just have fun. I think the aesthetic is also quite nice. I'd love to see more buildings like this. Not the best resource, but it is nice to have a bit of food variety. So if this takes your fancy, then definitely go for it. But for me, I didn't find it super useful. So there you are. That's our food guide for Manor Lords. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please do subscribe to the channel. There's so much more content coming. And drop a comment or a like on the video. It would be much appreciated. I'm still a very small channel and still trying to grow. So I really do appreciate it. And I hope to see you in the next one.